Welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I am Nerder Doug, and tonight I am going to trip through a discussion on acid with this nerd.
Nerdarchist Ted, how are you doing this fine and lovely evening, sir?
Great, as always. Monday is a great day. It's the start of a fresh week, and so we are off to the nerdy races here at Nerdarchy.
Yeah, I won't reveal what next week was, but as I'm kind of going for my afternoon constitutional, I was thinking about next week's topic, which I won't even be on for. It'll be you and Dave, and
Okay.
I'm like, oh, what can I talk about with this, and what can I talk about with that? I actually already wrote my link to piece for the newsletter, so like that's ahead of the schedule. But I sat down to hear it, and I'm like, oh, this topic is very different than what I was thinking about.
I've done that before, where you're like, yeah, I'm all prepared. I had all these thoughts about like whatever I thought the topic was, and it's like, oh, that's next week or whatever.
Yeah. So okay, well, you know what? All the extra things that I thought about, well, maybe I'll expound upon my newsletter piece and what have you. Or just, maybe save that all for an extra special blog article. Who knows?
Oh, yeah, there you go.
But tonight, we're here to talk about, the element of acid and different ways to use it in, 5th edition D&D.
Yeah, my first note that I wrote down that I just kept coming back to whenever I would think about it all week was melty and gross. And in the sense of just like, I know all the damage types and slashing of swords and burning people with fireballs and everything are dangerous, but like there's just something about acid. It's like whether it's the Aliens movie or like Two-Face's origin or whatever, it's like it's just gross to just melt somebody with acid or like just corrosive material. Or I don't know if anybody's seen RoboCop. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, I will throw this out there as a tidbit on Nerdarchist Ted lore. I did not play a lot of wizards in the early days, but from the earliest of editions of me playing, Melf's Acid Arrow, for whatever reason, was one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, I mean that is an iconic spell if there ever was one. I mean, it's named, it's been in every edition. Yeah, I love the name spells.
And I like its damage output, like all at once, was never something that like pushed it off the top of the charts. But the fact that it had ongoing damage for a lot of things, I always enjoyed. And I'm like, all right, this is kind of cool. And you could have a character who was archer themed, or you could have spells that like, oh well, I just do this. That's the somatic for casting the spell.
Yeah, it's a really evocative, like magical spell, right? It's like it's got what is it, like an adder's poison sac is the thing.
Adder's bladder or something.
And you like stretch it back, and then it just forms this magical acid arrow, and yeah, it's just very evocative of that. Like you said, whether you want to imagine that like archery is part of your guy, or it's just like, nope, that's just named after the famous wizard Melf who used a bow.
So I just it was definitely a fun thing, and
oh yeah, absolutely.
There's an odd tidbit out there for anybody who actually cares.
So to follow up or expand on my melty and gross point, if anybody's ever read Dragons of Summer's Night, I think it is the first Dragonlance Chronicles book. The spoiler alert: Riverwind getting a face full of I forget the black dragon's name, acid. Just the way they described it in the book. That just that was right around when I started playing D&D too. So yeah, I've just always had like a healthy fear of acid in the game because it just seems nasty.
That's a what, a 30-year-old novel at this point?
Yeah, maybe even longer, 40. It's probably like 40 years closer to that.
I mean, I only read the original Dragonlance trilogy, and it was absolutely like I read it and forgot most of it.
Yeah, right. Well, the way like again, having like play D&D at the time too. Maybe that probably had a lot to do with like my appreciation for like really trying to imagine like what it is like being in these situations.
Sure.
We played D&D, so we fought black dragons, and it's like, yeah, they might do a lot of damage, but it's like, it melts your armor. I mean, and it might not in game mechanics terms, but
sure. Well, and that's the thing that different editions have treated uh, different damage types different.
Yeah, sure.
It is entirely possible that if you had non-magical armor and you were hit with any kind of acid damage, it could corrode or just destroy as much or as little as what the DM was feeling, mean or generous about.
Oh yeah, you're right. I think I want to say like some editions had like percentile rolls for your stuff. Like when you took massive damage, it's like I've heard of players that like, yeah, our DM made us roll for like every item on our equipment list. Like, did it break? Did it melt? Did it burn? Or whatever.
And that can be dangerous, whether you're talking about spells, traps, or the aforementioned breath weapons of very powerful dragons. And let's face it, if you've got an ancient dragon, you probably should have magical gear. But if you don't, and you stand in the path of it, like you're looking at like an 80% chance that your armor is just gone.
And an easy way to do that, now I'm thinking about it, is and something that all of us, at Nerdarchy love doing and do all the time, is just cobbling together different things that exist in the game to sort of spice things up, right? Like imagine an ancient blank dragon battle, but just make its breath weapon also do what like a black pudding does too, which is totally valid, right? I mean, that is essentially what black pudding is doing. It's acid damage that's melting your armor and weapons.
Sure.
So that can add a tremendous layer of challenge to things.
And if black puddings are an acidic creature, like the dragon itself could attract those things.
Yeah, they're immune to those damage types, so it's like it's layer with like big acid pools. It's not gonna hurt them. I think clay golems are immune to acid too. That'd be another thing.
Yeah, I mean, so you could have all these things that are littered and designed, which back in some editions, like really interesting GMs would try to tailor fit everything makes sense. Sometimes the written adventures were like, okay, these things are all existing in the same place. There's no rhyme or reason for it, which is one of the reasons why homebrew seem to grow upon that, because it's like, well, no, I want things that all make sense and all have a reason. I'm down for theme. If you can have things that all are thematically built for some reason, because of environment or because of a similar immunity or resistance, that is more fun for me.
Yeah, that's kind of like the spirit of the Monster BFF videos, which are some of my favorites. I mean, several of my favorite videos are those. I mean, Dave were just talking about one last week, but yeah, that's it. And sometimes they're disparate monsters, like on paper. Maybe it's like, why would these two things, and they only share that. But that's where it can like kind of fuel your imagination, because it's like coming up with a reason why these two acid immune monsters are together is fun. And it can maybe even be the seed for the whole adventure. It could just start it with like just as simple as that. Like, these two things are immune to acid. Why would they be together?
Right. Perhaps that there is, another piece of the puzzle that you might not have thought of. Is the black dragon who has all of this acid related monsters, is he in cahoots with some kind of elemental wizard or sorcerer who is possibly making, conjuring, or bringing these types of creatures here? Maybe it's all factored to a cult of creatures that worship acid and this particular black dragon, and all of these things that can walk through acid are considered divine being,
or like sacred things.
Sacred, that's the word I'm looking for. Because it's like, acid is a special thing, and those who do not melt in its presence are the best.
Revered. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, acid's like weirdly, I guess not so weirdly, but it's kind of been tied to the earth, plane of earth a lot, I guess, because it's like, it's sort of elemental in that way. It's like a chemical thing, and like a mineral stuff.
Each of the four elements they wanted to have be a damage type,
right?
And earth is typically either soil or rock,
right? So you think bludgeoning, but
there's bludgeoning damage, so like that is not going to be elemental. So they had to give it something, and I think a lot of games have just shoehorned acid into that spot, and it's been in the RPG space long enough that that's
Oh
just
yeah.
kind of what is expected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like it's kind of like a chicken or the other thing. It's like, am I just connecting it in my mind because I'm so used to it, or does it actually make sense?
So, what is your take? Looking at Brian's comment, disfigurement is a nasty aspect of acid. Most of the other elemental types, but yeesh. So, what is your take on either temporary or permanent disfigurement because of damage types, most notably acid, since that seems to like eat away much faster than else.
I wouldn't just throw it in a game, on a whim or anything. I mean, I would, if it was something that like the players were into and stuff. But there's, to that point, there's like permanent injury sort of stuff in the DMG. But I mean, I guess I wouldn't think of it any different than the not like the damage leading up to. But basically, like if it was like the final blow, like if it killed your character,
so the thing that dropped
you. Yeah, because it's like I really it's super hard, but it's like I struggle not to think of like the damages being hit on you because it's like you'd be dead, like nothing would survive, like getting burned, stabbed, slashed, poison and all that stuff.
It's this is stepping away from acid, and we've talked about this numerous times, but the concept of hit points, your whatever terminology you want to use,
it's a poorly named term because it's called hit points, so you think like, well, it's hitting you.
So like that's something that some games do where like you've got a threshold of endurance and what have you, and once that's worn away and you've jumped, jived, and moved and taken superficial hits for a long time, but now you're finally down to actual hit points, and it's something that the realistic aspect of D&D doesn't handle well. And I've talked to GMs who are like, oh well, it's not really until you get down to that 10% or 20% that represents you actually being hit.
Yeah.
But thematically, it is really boring to describe.
You just barely
the giant swings his massive sword in your direction. You juke to the side and narrowly get out of the way, take 17 points of damage. What? It's not as much fun as like, okay, you take the hit and you're pushed back and what have you. People want these kind of descriptions. They want they want their characters to basically be a badass.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a challenge for sure.
So Viking Beard wants to know: do you consider a difference of magical versus chemical, or like magical versus actual? Comparing acid and fire.
I would say yes for a couple of reasons. One is just like we were talking about how being tied to the earth element. I would kind of, it's like you're summoning like elemental acid, like from another place, basically, or conjuring it or whatever. Because a lot of actually like, acid spells and things are conjuration spells, not evocations, because it's like you're creating something. But it doesn't stick around, and many of them don't affect objects. So that kind of like bleeds into mechanically why I would also consider it like that too, because then it's like, well, then you get into like, could you just cast acid splash like a bazillion times and make acid files and things that are melt locks? Because I don't think it only damages creatures and things. So I would say for those two reasons combined, I would consider magical acid different for sure.
Okay, so based off of that comment, if you're conjuring this acid, what if somebody is trying to get through a lock or a doorway? Do you stick to raw and say, well, it says target creature, so it's not going to damage the lock or the door, be it a cantrip or be it spell?
Yeah, I do. I wouldn't say it comes up like all the time, and I can't like recall like all the specifics sometimes, but I know that has happened several times in games, and I do just stick to raw because it's like I can imagine that's probably why it is written that way, because otherwise it's like you just melt through everything. It's like, oh, you're in a cage, I melt through the lock. There's a lock on the door, I melt through the lock. I mean, it would just never, it would just be too
to,
much of an easy button.
to me, I will look at it as a resource. If you want to expend a second level spell slot because you don't have lock picks or the thief just can't seem to roll high enough to get out, sure. I want.
Yeah, but acid splash is a cantrip.
That's where I was getting.
Oh, okay. I see what you're. Yeah, right.
Is
right,
a resource,
right. Yeah.
But a cantrip, I'm not gonna give you as the freebie.
Mm-hmm. And also, just from like a, I don't know. To me, that seems like a realistic thing too, where it's like mechanically, even if that worked, it's like, do you think a heroic person would just sit there and like continue it? I don't know. It kind of like cheapens the magic. It's like, I get that you can do it at will, but it's like, I don't know, if you're just going to sit there and like just continuously like evoke this magical stuff just because you don't want to like pick a lock, it just seems kind of lame. And
honestly, I think you and I are both creative, whether we're sitting in the GM seat or in the player seat, and we tend to game with experienced gamers. So there are going to be possible multiple solutions.
Yes,
I don't feel that it's necessary to come up with a outside the box. Can I use acid to melt things away? But I just wanted the take on it because
sure.
I know it comes up in conversation.
Oh yeah, right, yeah, quite a bit, especially like with that particular thing, acid splash. Somebody said something about eating acid regularly. Yep. So one of my things that I want to talk is acid is definitely factors into like culinary silence. And little known fact about Iron Justice, most of what I do prep usually includes at least somewhere in there. There's like an actual like little food, trivia thing. Like the cabbage thing, the planet that it was crashing into was highly acidic, and that is why it would have fermented, because that's like the main catalyst for making kimchi is like an acidic substance, and just little stuff like that. That's kind of fun.
Well, I mean, that's definitely an appropriate point about eating acid. Whether it be tomatoes or oranges,
citrus.
There's a lot of high acid content in those things. We have acid in our body. It's what causes indigestion and heartburn. And I'm definitely I wouldn't say guilty party there, but I'm a sufferer there. That's the only daily medication I need is to deal with that.
I guess to extrapolate on that, I mean, those flavors and stuff often brighten up whatever it is. But although like, just the concept of acid in a game term, it's like, I can't really think of any situations where acid would brighten up a situation.
Well, I mean, when we think acid,
it's so tied to that damage type.
But it's descriptively, it's like a vibrant green. So from a visual perspective, if you come upon a pool of acid and there's just the smallest bit of light, it tends to glow in my opinion. So
bubble. I always picture it bubbling like slowly, like boom.
Well, only if it has something that it can be consuming. That's the only time, because like it's dissolving things away.
Oh, okay. I get
like
you.
if it's in like a glass basin or like an obsidian basin, and it can't eat through whatever's there, then it could just be, this is a green pool that is slightly glowing. I don't know whether acid is supposed to glow, but because it's that violent shade of green, I always have this, almost reflective quality to it.
Oh yeah, and there's tons of awesome fantasy art to back that up. But yeah, that is super. I mean, and that's like one of those just classic DM things along the same lines as real lifelike looking statues and things like that, where it's like you're intentionally telegraphing to people like there is danger. It's like a pool of glowing green liquid in like a dark cavern or something. That's like a danger sign. Like, don't touch this.
So I'm bouncing all over the place here, and I do apologize. Sure. But we mentioned clay golems. I've got a general search on D&D Beyond of just the term acid, And clay golems are not only just immune to acid, but whenever they're subject to the acid damage, it takes no damage and instead regains a number of hit points equal to the acid damage dealt.
Oh. So yeah, pairing those up with acid.
Yeah, clay golems would absolutely be devastating in a black dragon's lair. And if you put things that did acid damage in area effect scenarios, the clay golem's gonna be improved by that. So
just think of a single clay golem and like a gelatinous cube as like your dungeon's custodians or whatever. It's like that's pretty potent. Because they could just walk right through it and stuff like that. It's not gonna hurt. It's gonna heal it.
I mean, if you really want to be an absolute jackass, can you put a clay golem inside a gelatinous cube?
Yeah.
So like the two of them are just kind of going together. And since the gelatinous cube really doesn't, since it's considered see-through, until it's kind of like on top of you.
Yeah, maybe the clay golem wants to grapple and pulls the things in too and just holds you there.
Well, they could, they would just see the clay golem slowly moving forward. Yeah. And if you do it, while it's, like close enough, like it could round a corner and they're like, oh, I attacked the thing. And like the damage kind of gets absorbed by the gelatinous cube. It's incredibly low armor class. Or, they rush in and step into the gelatinous cube to take damage. So like you could really be an absolute, beast of a DM. Like that.
And that's kind of the interesting thing. So I didn't write down the specifics, but there's quite a few monsters that are resistant to acid and almost the same amount that are just straight up immune to it. And yeah, like when you start, like we were talking about earlier, when you're just pairing things together like that, you come up with some really interesting things. And also, like even, it's irrelevant of like the character levels, right? Because it's like maybe it's not the big encounter of the whole adventure or whatever, but anything where it does extra stuff, like it slows you down, it engulfs you, maybe it hurts your weapons, like the black puddings and stuff, like are just regardless of the character's level, even if they high level, it's like, hey, if one of them hits, it still might do something that will impact the story and the adventure, and maybe not have like a huge mechanical impact. If you're 15th level and you're it's like, oh, it's I only get a plus 12 to hit instead of plus 13 now or whatever. Still pretty hard, but it also contributes to the story and just makes it more interesting. It gave the characters and the players probably pause and something to think about, and like, oh, remember that time when that black pudding like ate through your sword or whatever. Actually, I love oozes. And a lot of the oozes do deal acid damage and do other stuff like that too. And that my Spelljammer campaign, my home game, one of the player who was a fighter, he had like not maybe a few sessions before I got his first plate mail armor, and he wasn't really like a D&D nerd. He didn't know all the just common stuff that longtime players know. And they were confronted with a black pudding, and he just was like, oh man, I'm gonna like fight this thing and get blah blah blah, and it was just tearing his armor apart. And all the other players were like, just get away from it, man.
I gotta kill it.
Yeah. And he was like upset, not like raging at the game or the thing or anything, but it was like his character was too, and it was fun, and it was definitely a memorable moment. So the melty grossness of acid can create some good memories for you.
So I definitely would be upset if that were to happen. I mean, I know the gold cost on plate, and the save up and then just almost immediately have it go away. It's like no.
I guess I'm thankful though that he like a lot of times and you play with me a lot too. It's like, yeah, sometimes like really crummy things will happen to characters, but I feel like usually when I play with people, and I try to extend this to GMs I play with too, it's like I trust them. It's like, yeah, but really cool stuff's gonna happen too. So it's like that does stink, but it's like it's not the end of the world, and I'm not like out to get them.
I would agree with that. I feel that as you gain levels, your treasure goes up, and if you trust your GM, they might take something away, and you're going to suffer for a little bit, but then you're going to get something, equal or better, down the road.
Yeah.
And like, I typically trust that this is going to happen. And if not, okay, well, that character is, got something to remember, and it's sad. But overall, we're playing a game. We're here to have fun, and your character's not always going to be the center of attention. Your character's not always going to win out and be brighter tomorrow. So.
Speaking of games, not to deviate too much, but we had our fan game yesterday, and that was a lot of fun. I got to play with some people that I know you have, both you and Dave have, and somebody that I had done one of the monthly one shots from before. So cool. That was a lot of fun. I just grabbed a couple of things from out of the box.
Nice.
And we played for about, it was like 3.5 hours maybe.
There's so many things in and out of the box that can easily be kind of paired or trioed together to make for a beautiful one shot. I've got a couple of things that I've essentially earmarked to be like, oh well, I could work with this or I could work with that. If I ever feel the need of, oh, I need to get this, or I don't have an idea ready, I can just pull those out, run them. But it's also a great thing to cherry pick and move along with, because it's like, there's a lot of great stuff that's in there. I had run a very, very chaotic game for my son's scout troop.
Oh yeah. I don't think I've talked to you about that.
They had done, their own version of summer camp, isolated tents so that, nobody was, sharing a tent, and, all doing their own thing. But I was asked, like, hey, would you be willing to come down and run just a one shot of D&D? Some kids have played before, some things aren't, some kids have never really, had any experience whatsoever. So I was told 7. Then the day before I was told it was up to 12. And by the time I got there, it was all 15 kids. So from like age 12 or 13 to like age 16, 17, it was an experience.
Yeah, I bet. Wow. And you didn't know until like you got there, basically.
I mean,
you probably didn't start playing immediately, but
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I knew what I was going to do. And once I was told that, 12 were going to be there, I was pretty confident that the last 3 would just kind of join in anyway. So I came with 15 character sheets already prepared that they just, got to pick.
That's smart.
Yeah, there was no way I was going to be able to allow them to create. I didn't have access to a computer. I was not bringing books and pencils and, blank character sheets to fill out. There just wasn't.
Yeah, good call. That was smart.
But I know I had used, our, goblin on the bat, but I turned it into a vulture for the game. But I had a goblin pirate ship was attacking them. So they started on a boat. They were attacked. It was a little bit of, beforehand, a little bit after, and a single combat. But it was, definitely a lot of fun. But with 15 kids all taking turns and 15 monsters, it was a bit difficult.
Actually, one of the cooler things about the game yesterday was, so I used I can't remember the name, but it was the one with like the Cerebugs and the giant, and they're like infecting the sheep or whatever. But whenever I do the one shots, I always like to ask the players, like the first thing I do is ask the players like questions about the characters, about each other. I'm like, oh, you all work for the company, the NAG. Like, what's a rumor that you heard about, one of your other people? Because it's like, well, they don't know each other, so it just gets the players talking. But anyways, the one players said, I was like, what was your particular reason for being in this region at the time? And he said, oh, I'm from here, and so I always like to check back and make sure things are safe around my hometown. And so, when they started getting into like the mystery, and he's like, oh, that's probably like old man Jenkins' goat farm. And that was cool because it's like, well, in the encounter it's sheep, but I was like, oh yeah, it's easy enough to change them to goats, and just like little stuff like that. And that's why I like those things. And to your point about like switching them to vultures, it's like you could just switch out things, not going to really change the structure of what's going on, but they're like little toolboxes. It's like, here's some elements, and see what happens.
Anything that is a visual or cosmetic change does nothing. If it allows you to adapt it for your setting, for your game, to allow it, a character to feel more at home or more interested in something, it's definitely a lot more fun to go in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
But it is the halfway point, and it is the first Monday of the month.
Cool.
Which we might know what that means. So I've got a list here on my handy dandy device. So we have a giveaway, which I had talked about, sharing, piecemeal. But Doug inspired me to get a picture of all of it that we shared out on social media. It's a whole bunch of books. It's a whole bunch of swag. It's got art. It's got dice. It's got minis. There's all kinds of stuff that is in that box. It's well over $300 worth of stuff for our midsummer giveaway.
Maybe even close to 500. I mean, there's like several official D&D books in there, and those are like 40 something bucks a pop.
Yeah, there's 3 official books. There is the out of the box encounters, complete with all of the maps and minis.
Yeah, man, that's like $200 right there.
So, all right, so yeah, probably closer to 400 or 500 then. I mean, there's some unique artwork that's in there. So I don't even know how much that would go for. So that is going to be Ian Sellers. So I've not sent the email yet, but Ian is one. I will go ahead and contact you in the very near future. And then this month, as we have celebrated Dave's birthday yesterday, he is actually the one to game with the fans this month, and the names selected, and he will be in contact. The game is going to be August 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always with these things, we don't stream them anymore so that everybody can be, kind of comfortable and enjoy, have some time to hang out a little before, a little after, and enjoy, some nice rolling funny shaped dices and talking in funny voices. But we have got the Empress, the Dark Lord Jim, Kim Fontaine, Andrew, Elvin Johnson, Christopher Brace, Nicholas Ciampaglia, Alexander Stubley, Adam Finney, and Samuel Aaron Cottam. So I know I've definitely seen some of those names before. I definitely recognize Alexander Stubley. We've, I believe, actually interacted in person.
So I actually had a couple of thoughts about acid that kind of excited me. I'll float them past you. But one thing I wanted to say about our monthly fan games too. So one of the players yesterday that was in my game wasn't super knowledgeable about like all the rules and stuff. And he kept like apologizing and everything, which is totally okay. So I just wanted to let everybody else there know, like, if you get contacted to be in this game, one of our games, and you're not sure because you don't feel like, I don't know all the rules, that's totally okay. Nobody cares. Nobody got upset, and I'm more than happy to help. We love playing with anybody, and all the other players were cool.
Nerdarchy is friendly to all levels of familiarity with the rules. For the most part, if you're doing something in D&D and you're not sure what to do, you're typically going to roll a D20 if somebody asks you to roll something. Beyond that, it's pretty easy, and we are all easygoing, fun people, and we want to make the bridge into any RPG easier. We are not in any way, shape, or form wanting to gatekeep and keep people out. We want more and more people to come and enjoy, this passion that we love, that we enjoy so much. Dave and I have been gaming together. I want to say it's like 25 years at this point. It's been a long time. So
yeah, we're happy to help you answer. It's not like I have comprehensive knowledge of everything. We notice either. So I was really struggling to think of like, how can acid be something like good or positive? And I came up with one idea. Oftentimes when we try to think in that way, it's like, well, how can it be a quest? And it does corrode and eat things away, so maybe something needs to be cleansed and like acid that's only found in one of those like glowing strange pools that's in a hard to reach place or something like that, and you got to like put an item, like whether it's a MacGuffin that you need to get another MacGuffin, so you got to go to the third MacGuffin to cleanse it or whatever. But or even to have a black like to like it has to be hit by the breath of like an ancient black dragon or something. So maybe even if you're a lower level thing, you can have those kind of epic encounters and still get that like fear and challenge that people think. It's like you're going into it not thinking like we're going to fight this thing to the death. Like, look, we just got to put this thing there, get a hit with acid, and GTFO.
Right. and that could be a cool role playing encounter, or it could. All right,
that's true. It doesn't have to be.
We have to piss it off to make it breathe acid, and then we need the GTF. Out, that could be in and of itself of like, oh my god, we actually survived. We saw the dragon. We didn't run away immediately in fear. We got him to do what we needed to do, or rephrase that to make it not seem like we manipulated him.
Yeah. It could even be like a social interaction encounter too. It's like maybe you'd want to learn about the black dragon in question and like what is it like? What does it collect anything? And then try to like appease it somehow to get it to do those things. To get it to do that for you. And not just kill you and take that take your treasure too.
So let me ask this question on the topic of acid. What are your thoughts on creatures that deal acid damage, regularly or with like an innate attack that are not in any way, shape, or form resistant to or immune to said damage?
Like an Ankeg, I think.
Yes, case in point, the Ankeg. It does a bite damage, but it also has an acid spray that it can shoot its acid out, but it does not have any special defenses whatsoever from acid damage.
I can buy that if it just has like a gland in its mouth that sprays acid, projects it out. That doesn't necessarily mean its carapace is resistant to that acid. I guess it's kind of strange, but I don't know. This maybe is a dumb question, but like, are snakes immune to venom and stuff? Like, if a rattlesnake bit another rattlesnake, is it immune? Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the same thing. Where it's just like in a sac in their mouth.
Yeah, I don't know enough about real world snakes to know how snake on snake crime happens.
But yeah, I guess I could buy that it wouldn't itself be resistant to the acid. Maybe and also they're just like they have like 2 intelligence, right? I mean, they're just giant insects, so it's like, well, if they fight each other, I could see it being
and kegs by raw have a 1.
What's that?
And kegs by raw have a 1 intelligence.
1? It's that low? They're like lower
minus 5.
That's like as low as it gets. It couldn't be any lower.
If you can do a single point of intelligence damage, you can take out an Ankeg in one go.
Is there anything that does that?
I don't believe so.
Intellect Devourer.
That does it?
Do they? Don't they do like one? Like it does like 3d6 damage to your intelligence. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They just like take you over.
I've actually been thinking a lot about Intellect Devourers. Watching the live chat today, that Dave was talking to Sean, and he talked about his brain beasts, which is his version of the Intellect Devourer.
We have our own too. That was funny because this is real quick, but like the player in the game yesterday said something about Intellect Devourer. So I'm like, there's Sarah bugs, thanks to IP.
But it was definitely very, very amusing, and the mini he's got is pretty cool. I'm like, all right, I need to go find that thing now. But my brain has been kind of lurking, and I run quite a number of regular games, and I'll kind of throw this out there. It could be in the kids game, it could be in a streamed game, it could be in a home game, but one of the characters that are in one of my games actually has an Intellect Devourer in their head.
Oh, that's a cool little tidbit to just throw out there.
Yeah.
Because you do run a lot of games, so there's a lot of people who might see that clip and be like, "Oh my gosh,
You know,
that's cool."
and you know, so like there's no real way of knowing, you know, what's what. But it's a lot of fun to kind of like, all right, I need to look at the meta here. I need to know what's going on and what
Well,
happens.
things like that and like doppelgangers and stuff, they're kind of cool because you can put them in your games, and maybe they don't have any thing to do with the party's agenda, right? It's like just in the town that they go to all the time. It could just be a podunk town. Or it's like maybe the innkeeper's a doppelganger, and it's like, yeah, he might be up to something nefarious. It just doesn't have anything to do with you. Or,
Right.
or to your point, an intellect devourer. It's like they might just not, maybe they don't want to tangle with you or reveal themselves. It's not like
Well,
it's not like everything in the game has to revolve around the character.
right. Yes. The thing is that the rest of the world is still has all its typical moving parts.
Yeah.
You know, while you might have a main quest and 4 or 5 different side quests that might be active, and 4 or 5 plot threads that you didn't realize were put out there
Yeah.
or just didn't decide to act upon. There are hundreds more that are out there, and you just there's nothing you can do about it. Every single character has their own story, their own goals, their own things that they want to see happen, and there's just no way to actually do it all. So just don't even bother.
Yeah, Brian Smith made a comment that got me thinking. So it's like on the cleansing topic, like certain things can become acidic too, like holy water and demons. And you could really expand on that too. And it made me think of like the video you guys did a while ago about like folklore monsters and like something like that can be real neat of just like, well, maybe in their investigations they learn that like, oh, like water from this spring deep in the forest that maybe has some connection to the backstory of this folklore monster, can like burn it, right? And it's like, yeah, just something like that, like getting there and could only it just that only does acid damage to that creature, so it's not like an inexhaustible source of like, hey, we just have this pool of acid. It's just water, but against that thing, so it can like overcome its vulnerabilities or whatever. And just all the I don't know. That's definitely a common theme that we like to. We're just like, how can I make this into a quest in a story? Like,
I mean, I basically feel that everything
oh yeah,
has the
mm-hmm.
ability to be a quest.
Yeah.
And every quest can honestly be an RP, an exploration, or a combat, depending upon the players at your table, what you yourself are interested in as the GM. I mean, how many times have we sat down and played an entire session and like there's not been any combat whatsoever? I've gone to a session and I think the least I interacted mechanically was like a single die roll.
In which game?
I don't even remember.
I thought you were saying a specific one.
No, just like.
Well, it's interesting. It's kind of, it really is like a give and take, and it's like, when you're the GM, players sort of reward you with their interest in playing the game, right? Like, and your reward to them is giving them a pathway to explore those interests. And so it's kind of fun that way. That's something all these games have in common, for me anyway. And I think that's kind of our steez, if you will. Like I don't think any of us really has like a fixed road in our minds. It can all be melted away like so much stuff under acid.
To me, I'm only on a fixed path in so much as how much limitation do I have with the story and the number of sessions and that kind of stuff. The more structure you give me, the less the paths are going to be out there. But if you tell me like, all right, we want to about face, okay, I'm gonna see how I can make this work. I'm never gonna limit you, with the games.
Mm-hmm.
I ran, my second campaign since 5th edition started, I felt was like I put forth a path and the players always took the choice that I expected them to do. So
Wow.
I had the material prepped, but I kind of took some nods from Dave of like, well, I know where you're going to go based on how the last session ended and what the characters' predilections were. So it was a 12 session story arc, and it ran very completely like a module. I prepared my material very differently than I had done before. I set out all of my encounters. I knew where they were going, and the players took that path for essentially all subsequent sessions. 2 through 12.
Wow, really?
Yep.
That's amazing.
I mean, the previous game, like they ran me ragged for 4 years of like, okay, numerous times, conversation at the table, conversation, in the group chat was, this is the direction we're going, this is the direction we're going. I prep all of that stuff. We show up at the table. Yeah, we're not going that way. We're going that way. I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? For a month, I've been planning this. And now we're going this way. Dump the stuff off the table. Okay, let's see how to make this happen. And I was flustered all night just because like anything I had dealt with was like, okay, doesn't mean anything. Okay.
You could also use acid as an exploration challenge too. If you think about it, like acid rain can have a much different interpretation in a in a fantasy world. It's not just like, oh, it's bad for the ozone layer. It's like, no, it could literally be acid falling from the sky.
It can be more than just acid rain. It can be a trap or a natural hazard.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the acid rain, what if the cave that you're exploring, you're walking around, and you might have a little bit of experience in the Underdark, or you might not, but the ceiling and the ground in front of you all have these weird kind of holes, like almost as if something is kind of burrowed in or out of, and what have you. And every so often drops of acid just kind of fall through. But if they don't sit there and watch and wait, they just kind of go through, acid could kind of fall on them, and that it could lead to, well, if they explore and find, there could be a pool of acid that's in a higher chamber that if somebody winds up going into, it pulls up and runs into this gullet where these lower holes have been drilled. But perhaps it's a combination thing of like a real world, or a creature uses that because there's some kind of sensor that lets people know, or lets them know that, oh, there's someone approaching, so they activate these things that take a natural hazard and turn it into a defense.
And I'm sure as well as I do, like sometimes when you just present anything, like, I don't want to put this, I see a lot of commentary on like the DMG or Tasha's or anything, and it's fair if people feel this way, but like it doesn't have enough support for the DM, right? And I'm thinking of, I was looking up things like these Eldritch Storms, and it actually does have a little thing about acid rain and Ghost of Salt Marsh and whatnot. And it's pretty basic, like there could be like any creature caught in the rain takes 2d6 acid damage at the start of each of its turns. Yeah, and it's like, well, then you can start layering things in. Like I said, like maybe it's just while they're traveling in the wilderness, right? And like, you described as like these drops start coming, but they're like sizzling on the ground, and it's like just that one little thing might spur on like a half an hour of role playing, right? As players like, can we find cover? They want to do these things, and it's like, I guess that's those sort of things, that's how those things become the story, right? It's not so much about like stopping the big bad guy. It's like, which you're still doing, but getting there was crazy, even if it only took a moment of like we had to duck for shelter. But maybe you tack on, I was just kind of musing here, and I keep going back to that thing with like the black puddings and the dissolving. I think maybe it's that. It's like, sure, it just does a little bit of acid damage, but it's like now your stuff starts getting corroded too, and you notice, and it's like that could easily take up an hour of gaming of just dealing with that. And I bet you a bunch of crazy stuff would happen, and probably give you as the DM many, just kind of inspire you as you're playing to.
If you are looking to play, a more realistic, a more survival and like loss of stuff, kind of game where acid can destroy weapons and armor, and if you're not prepared, like problems are going to happen. As long as everybody is on board, your armor class is really tied to your survival. And I mean, even a single point, that's essentially 5% more chance you're going to get hit when you look at the roll of the die. One extra point down is like, oh no, that's 5% more chance of me getting hit. It's ridiculous, but that's really what that mechanic does. And like, I think some people are going to worry now. If you're prepared to play that kind of game, great, but you can't let that be like, okay, this is going to stall the game because players are afraid to move forward. So those are the things you need to be weary about, getting permission from the player, and as a player, not be willing to move forward, knowing that's where the story is, but being at too much of a fear of loss of your stuff.
Yeah, it just occurred to me because we've been doing all these like focus on like the damage types and stuff for a few weeks now, and they all share something similar that comes up in the chats. In that a lot that I think anyway is like when you focus on them, they our imaginations often lead to like long-term things, like whether it's exhaustion or frostbite or stuff getting damaged by acid. And I think the common thing that they all share is that they all those sort of concepts do well in a longer campaign, right? Like if you're just like the kind of games we play, it's like if you're playing 10 sessions, that's just going to bog it down. I mean, it's like you're not going to have as much fun stuff because that's just slowing it down. But if you're like playing like when we were kids, it's like, I don't know how long we're going to play. We just got together every Saturday and played D&D, right? For years. And it's like those sort of things would be more interesting because you could explore more and they wouldn't take away like from the limited time you had to predetermine.
Right. So Brian says, worst D&D or fantasy place to accidentally discover acid?
I mean, like LSD acid?
I think they're talking about, like you go to a place thinking it's one thing and there's really acid there. So I'm going to totally say like, the bathing pools.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
I think, the infamous hot springs of the Fey Forest where, you can go and enjoy a relaxing bloody, bloody, blah. But no, you get in and you are now submerged naked in a pool of acid.
Along those same lines, I would say maybe like some kind of like beverage, like where you're in like a new land and they just have different customs. And it's like, sure, maybe it even does like 1d6 acid damage to drink it, it's not going to kill you, but like, and to like a commoner in the stat block, like that is almost going to kill them. You know what I mean? It's like, so you really are brave to drink it.
That's hardcore.
There's actually, speaking of, was that, I don't know, one of the people we know, their supplement said somebody, it's Nord gave remarkable ends. And there's like this man, it's got all sorts of stuff in there, but there was like a menu of different like fantasy drinks, and one of them was like purple worm poison or purple worm wine or something like that. And yeah, that's a great book. Yeah, I used it in my Mandalorian bounty hunter D&D campaign because they were just kind of like, they went to a lot of inns like looking for info and tracking people. But and the people were like, "Are you sure you want this? It's like pretty harsh and everything." And I think you got to make like a DC 15 con save, or you're like paralyzed for an hour. And it's like there's no save every turn. It's like, nope, you're just straight up paralyzed. So of course, the player failed that check. So that's
I mean, there's a whole section on magical droughts you can take in here as well. There's just so much cool stuff in this book.
Oh yeah, the Nord
don't-
has so many fun things, books.
You know, if you're not used to, making up an interesting inn or tavern, this is definitely a great book to get. It's not Lord Games, it's Lore Smith, which kind of partners with Lord. But all of the remarkable stuff, I've got them. I enjoy them. I use them. But Remarkable Inns and Their Drinks is the definitive guide to taverns, how to create your own and bring them to life. The richly detailed and illustrated book offers a wealth of new gameplay options, 8 ready-made taverns, interesting NPCs, rumors, secrets, and over 1,000 random list options.
Yeah, that was super helpful for that game in particular, because like I said, they were all like bounty hunters, and I mean it was when the Mandalorian first came out, and we were just like, oh my god, this is awesome, I want to play a game. So like they went to a lot of taverns, just like tracking people down, and yeah, those things like those rumors and just crazy drinks and everything, it was, made it super like just interesting and memorable, I think. Oh, okay. What was I gonna say? Oh, if that question did refer to the illicit substance, I mean that's just the Feywild, man. That's what I think. It's like I was just Robin and I were just chatting last night about like Fey stuff, because they previewed that Treasures of the Feywild book for
cool
from the DM's Guild, and we were just both saying like I just love Fey stuff so much, and it's just like it kind of has like cartoon logic, in the Feywild to my sensibilities, or just that kind of it's like a step above the magic excuse. We're just like, how did this happen? It's magic. It's like, I don't know, you're in the Feywild, man.
How did that happen? Faye did it.
Yeah. Like, enough said. I don't want to get involved with that.
So, I mean, we can, loosely touch on the fact that, there's a number of creatures outside of the the black dragon that are dragons that do acid damage. The Neophthylid actually has an acid breath that does like a
really?
Stone that
what
does.
Are those things? Are they tied to like mind flayers somehow? Is it like a grick that's been
So a slime-covered worm of immense size, a Neophthylid, is a result of a mind flayer reproductive cycle gone horribly wrong. On a rare occasion, an illithid colony collapses typically after an external assault, and the elder brain is killed. And what happens? The colony's tadpoles are suddenly freed from their fate. They no longer serve as food and are no longer fed by their caretakers. Driven by hunger, they turn to devour one another.
They're just giant tadpoles?
Only one tadpole survives out of the 1,000 in the colony's pool. Wow. And it emerges as a Neophthylid.
Man, that's pretty horrifying and terrifying. Just to think about that, it's like, geez, like to survive amid like the collapse of the colony, the elder brain, thousands of other tadpoles. Like, man, that thing is a badass monster.
So they're aware of the presence of any creature within 1 mile that has an intelligence score of 4 or higher.
Jeez.
Innate psionic spell casting.
I thought it was just a dumb worm.
It's dumb. It's got an intelligence of 3, but it can cast confusion, feeble mind, and telekinesis. Wow. Has magic resistance. Has a tentacle attack, and can do a acid breath on a 60-foot cone that does 10d6 acid damage.
Jeez, a 60-foot cone?
Yeah.
That is a bad A creature, man.
So if you're looking for something that's like, you got them on this whole, mind flayer thing, and they're preparing all for this stuff, and then you whip this sucker out, it's like, holy crap, what is that?
There's a lot of things to be inspired by there. I mean, even just those little like thinking of its stat block, like, well, it knows about creatures, but itself is dumb, and the story of how they come about. It's like, boy, that's so many things to give you ideas there, and
so you could have a lot of fun with that kind of stuff, and you can really take a look at all of these different damage dealing monsters and figure out like, whoa, well, what would be a cool way to use this? What would be something that would be an interesting take? And I hadn't really looked at these guys before. The artwork is pretty cool. It's a powerful stat block. This is a challenge 13 monster. It's got a 27 strength, 21 constitution.
Wow.
It's got actually proficiency in all 3 mental saving throws.
Oh, wow.
And it's got advantage against saving throws on spells and other magical effects.
Got blind sight, 325 average hit
and
points. That's gargantuan.
It's been out for a while because it's Volo's Guide to Monsters, page 181. So I mean, you could definitely have some fun, with something like that. And as we always suggest, go ahead and make some tweaks. What happens if somehow this thing has gotten a little bit smarter?
Maybe gets a headband of intellect.
Oh God, I wasn't going that far.
That would be terrifying to have all these powers and the intelligence to use them. What
happens if it was a little bit more, psionically active, and as opposed to telekinesis? As opposed to telekinesis, it just has telepathy. Or you just add telepathy and it's contacting people, and maybe it's not a 3 intelligence, but it's just above your dog, and
it's like 7 or
6
something.
or a 6, 6 or a 7, and it can communicate, and it's got some semblance, but it's got its own now things that it's looking for, but it's a massively powerful monster. So I guess
it's just cool. I guess I like all this batch of videos you're doing, because they kind of remind me of something that I just kind of enjoy on my own anyway. It's just like whenever you just focus on any one little thing, it can really just give your imagination a lot of ideas, right? Whether it's acid or the armor things I've been looking at, or
there's lots of people that there's lots of people that say acid is going to give you a lot of good ideas.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just couldn't let that one.
Oh no, absolutely. Well, we're just past 9, so that seems like a great pun to
end on.
Yes.
So I will throw out there, you can always return Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Dave does the live chats. They're always a lot of fun. There's always some, fun conversations that happen in the side chat. And of course, you can always return tomorrow night for Ingest Quest. What number are we on here, sir?
11.
We're on 11? Oh, yeah. No. We're getting close. I love these stories. It's a great group. It's a fun game. You have to come check it out. And apparently we only got 2 episodes left before we begin transitioning to a new DM, a new story.
Yeah.
So with that, we will go through all of the motions, do all those things that make the internet's happy. Like, share, subscribe, click that notification bell, and until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.